Hi, I'm Scott Humphrey, CEO of the World Floor Covering Association, and this is Leadership Live. And before I go too far into this week's lead story, I want to thank those of you who responded to my plea last week. I basically begged you, please reshare that post, because in it I talked about living your eulogy on a daily basis. Not waiting for people to speak about you when you're gone, but realizing that every encounter you have, every interaction you have, is an opportunity to leave an impression that is what people will truly remember when you are no longer here. And I challenged you to evaluate that at the end of every day. That post had twice the responses we've ever had to a Leadership Live previously, and I thank you for that. I started thinking about that, innovators whose life outlasts them. I think about that with the WFCA. People often ask me, what does the WFCA do? Well, we have a purpose statement. It guides everything we do. It says that we exist to ensure the success and profitability of professional flooring dealers and to represent the industry's common interest. But when we think about what needs to be done, we don't say what's always been done. We don't ask other associations what they do. We look to see if anyone is already addressing the problem. And then if they are not, and if we can't find someone outside our industry that we can partner with, we address it ourselves. Sometimes the best way to do it is a way that has not yet been done. Just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it's the best way. It just means it's always been done that way. In March of this year, a legend died, a gentleman who changed his realm forever by his innovation. His name was Dick Fosbury, and if you've heard that last name before, it's probably because you've watched track and field, and you've heard of the Fosbury flop. It is the traditional style now of high jumping, but before 1968, it was not. And when Dick Fosbury premiered that at the Olympics in 1968, yes, he had done it some in college and some in high school, but when he did it in 1968, it was the first time the world began to see there was a different way of high jumping. Prior to that, there were two primary methods. There was the scissor and there was the Western straddle rule. And both of those had you throwing your body over face first and landing on your feet. In fact, Fosbury's innovation really was dependent on another innovation, because initially you high jumped onto hard ground, maybe onto sand, and then it moved to sawdust, and then it became foam padding. And with foam padding, you could be innovative and land differently. And what Fosbury decided to do, using his engineering background, even though everyone continued to tell him, you're crazy, his hometown paper made up the name Fosbury Flop because they said he looked like a fish flopping on dry land when he jumped. But Fosbury was committed to doing the way that worked best for him. Now, if you ask Fosbury, he would tell you he was the worst high jumper on his high school team. In fact, he never broke a record, but he did break his hand because he was one time challenged to jump over a chair, and he did not successfully do it. He hit the chair, landed on his hand, and broke it. And he began to experiment with his love for engineering and began to realize the center of gravity had so much to do with success in the high jump. So instead of approaching the bar forward, he approached the bar backward. And if you've seen the Fosbury flop, you realize what he does is throw his back over first and then kick his legs up at the end to help him get over the bar and fall back on what is now the foam padding, which again allowed his innovation to take place. When he got to Oregon State, where he was offered a scholarship, the coach asked him to go back to the straddle jump because that's how everybody did it. And yet he was never able to reach the same height. So the coach finally acquiesced and said, okay, Dick, do what you're going to do. And so he continued to win meet after meet, doing it a different way. And finally, at the Olympics in 1968, with two shoes that did not match, Dick Fosbury won the gold medal. He didn't break the world record, but he did at the time break the Olympic record. And he had the fans going nuts over him. Fosbury was a unique character. He was kind of eccentric. He didn't socialize a lot. And in fact, at the opening ceremony, Fosbury didn't go. Instead, he drove out to the pyramids and slept in a camper overnight and then came back for the event. He didn't practice a lot because with his technique, it didn't require as much practice. But what he did was change the high jump forever. I say all this to say that your eulogy, that story that I've challenged you to live, It doesn't have to be the one you've always lived. And it doesn't have to be the one that everyone else lives. I challenge you to question, is there a better way? Maybe the way you're doing it and the way everyone around you do it is because that's the way everybody has always done it. And maybe you need to have a Fosbury moment where you just break out and experiment with something different, something unique, something new. Dick Fosbury is an amazing story. Again, passed away this past March at 76 years old. But his story, his life will long outlive him because he dared to be an innovator. You can be an innovator too. I want to challenge you to question the way it's always been done and go out there and live the story that you want other people to tell.